Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving right into a real medical mystery today, one that's as fascinating as it is deeply important: motor neuron disease. Using the evidence gathered from our sources, we're going on a bit of a detective hunt to track down the hidden environmental culprits behind this really devastating condition.
To kick off our investigation, think about this for a second. It's a pretty staggering fact. If only 10% of motor neuron disease cases are inherited, meaning, they're passed down through specific genetic mutations like the SOD1 or FUS genes, what exactly is causing the rest of them? What's triggering this disease in the vast majority of patients who have absolutely no family history of it?
Well, that brings us straight to this massive number, 90%. Over 90% of these cases are what we call sporadic. That means they just kind of appear out of nowhere without any clear genetic driver. And when genetics aren't the main cause, well, environmental triggers immediately become our prime suspects. There's something out there in the world, or maybe a complex combination of things, that's setting off this whole neurodegenerative cascade, and we really need to figure out what it is.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today's explainer. 1. The mystery of motor neurons. 2. Toxic suspects in the environment. 3. Occupational and lifestyle hazards. 4. How the damage actually happens. And 5. Shared clues across brain diseases.
Section 1. The mystery of motor neurons.
So this disease attacks very specific pathways in the body. You've got upper motor neurons up in the motor cortex, and they send signals all the way down to the lower motor neurons in your spinal cord, which then connect directly to your muscles. As these nerves degenerate and die off, the brain literally loses the ability to initiate and control voluntary movement. It leads to muscle atrophy and really immense difficulty speaking, swallowing, and eventually breathing. But honestly, the wildest part of this mystery? For the most part, cognitive function is completely spared. A person's mind remains totally sharp and alert while their body's control systems just systematically shut down.
And it strikes pretty late, usually in late middle age, peaking around 60 to 70 years old. As you can tell by the survival rates, it's rapidly progressive. There's a steep drop-off from the very first symptom. Because it eventually compromises the respiratory system, finding out what triggers this rapid decline is quite literally one of the most pressing puzzles in modern neurology. We don't just want to manage the symptoms here, we have to understand the root causes so we can stop it from ever happening in the first place.
Section 2. Toxic suspects in the environment.
All right, let's look at the lineup of our environmental suspects. At the top of the list, we have a toxin called BMAA. That stands for beta-methylaminoalanine. It's this neurotoxin produced by certain algae blooms, and it's actually been linked to eating very specific diets. Next up, heavy metals and pesticides. These show up time and time again in the epidemiological data as major potential risk factors. And finally, there's even some evidence suggesting that certain viral exposures might set the stage, predisposing some people to the disease. These are the toxic suspects that we think might be pulling the trigger.
Section 3. Occupational and lifestyle hazards.
Now, this is where the clues get super interesting. We see elevated risks in some very distinct groups of people. Take farmers and military personnel. They share a higher risk, which strongly points right back to pesticide, herbicide, and heavy metal exposures, basically the occupational hazards of those specific jobs. But then, we also see a surprisingly increased risk among professional athletes and, once again, military personnel. So what links those two? Head trauma. Repeated physical hits to the brain might be acting as an environmental trigger itself, kicking off the exact same neurodegenerative processes. It's a little scary, honestly, how our jobs or our lifestyles can inadvertently put us right in the crosshairs of these hidden triggers.
Section 4. How the damage actually happens.
Let's zoom way into the cellular level to see the weapons being used here. The first major mechanism of destruction is something called a proteopathy. Simply put, it's a disease where normally folded proteins inside the cell abnormally self-associate and clump together. Just imagine your brain has this built-in internal trash clearing system. Well, what happens when it completely fails? Instead of taking out the cellular waste, these abnormal proteins just aggregate. They pile up into toxic clumps and cause massive, irreversible cellular damage.
And when that trash clearing system fails, you can actually see the evidence left behind. We find these intraneuronal inclusions, dark, toxic clumps sitting right inside the cells. In motor neuron disease, the main ingredient of these clumps is a protein called TDP43, and it's usually hanging out alongside ubiquitin. These aggregates are essentially suffocating the motor neuron from the inside out until it dies. It's hard, visual proof of that proteinopathy at work, completely destroying the cell's architecture.
Culprit number 2 is glutamate excitotoxicity.
Now, glutamate is totally normal. It's a vital neurotransmitter that excites your neurons so they can pass signals along. But in this disease, the volume gets turned way too high. We see elevated, toxic levels of glutamate. All that extra glutamate causes excessive stimulation. It overworks the neuron, leading to a massive flood of calcium until the cell just completely burns out and dies. It's literally being overexcited to death. In fact, one of the only approved symptomatic treatments we have for this disease, riluzole, acts by trying to block this exact excitotoxicity process.
Finally, we've got oxidative stress and mitochondrial dysfunction. You remember from high school biology, right? The mitochondria are the powerhouses of the cell. Well, when they become dysfunctional, it creates a massive energy crisis. At the exact same time, we see a buildup of free radicals. Think of it like rust rapidly accumulating on a car's engine. Without enough antioxidants to mop up all this cellular rust, the oxidative damage slowly just breaks down the neuron's energy centers. And this is why another approved treatment, edaravone, acts as an antioxidant. It's trying to clean up the rust and slow down this very specific mechanism of damage.
Section 5. Shared clues across brain diseases.
So the crucial point is this. When we chart the risk factors for motor neuron disease, right next to Parkinson's disease, the similarities are absolutely striking. Pesticide exposure? A risk factor for both. The BMAA toxin? Yep, risk factor for both. And get this, BMAA chemically resembles glutamate. Heavy metals? Yes. Excitotoxicity and mitochondrial dysfunction? Yes, again. We are looking at the exact same environmental triggers and the exact same cellular failure mechanisms across completely different diseases. Sure, the specific neurons that die might change, motor neurons in one, dopaminergic neurons in the other, but the environmental culprits and the weapons they use, those are deeply shared.
Which leaves us with this final, really profound question. How will decoding these shared environmental clues ultimately lead us to prevent neurodegenerative diseases entirely? Think about it. If we can figure out exactly how these environmental toxins trigger those protein clumps and that exotoxicity, we might not just solve the mystery of motor neuron disease, we could very well be finding the master key to stopping Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and a whole host of other devastating conditions. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the fascinating world around you.